going on, y'all? So I'm live in Brooklyn right now.
I love your backpack.
We're in Clinton Hills. Oh, I'm sorry. We're actually in Park Slope. Clinton Hills. We're in Park Slope, Brooklyn. It's a nice, decent crowd. Maybe about 100, 200 people out here. Let you guys see the... So we're actually headed, southeast. We're on the Flatbush Avenue extension, so this actually heads towards Prospect Park. I'm not exactly sure what the destination is, but if we keep heading down this road, we'll definitely be near Prospect Park. Sorry about that, I had to clean the glass.
Shut it down. Shut it down. If we don't get it, shut it down. If we don't get it, shut it down. If we don't get it, shut it down. What do we want? What do we want? What do we want? What do we want? If we don't get it, if we don't get it, if we don't get it, if we don't get it.
Oh, he got caught by the moderators. To the moderators, be a little chill on the muting. But if it does get out of hand, don't hesitate to mute anybody. But it is a protest. It's a protest scope, so be a little lax with the moderation. So I'll give you guys a little recap of my day. I started out going to City Hall. They didn't march from City Hall. It was like kind of a demo, a rally more. I ran into Hulk from Black Lices Matter New York. Kind of have a conversation. I haven't seen him in a while, so we had a nice conversation about what he's been working with and his Times Square rally with Nick Cannon. And then from there, I went to Washington Square Park. I marched with the Washington Square Park group. I want to say maybe 30 minutes, and then I broke off to go cover the McCarran Park protest. When I got there wasn't really anything going on, so I left and came down to the Barclays because I heard there was some police activity. When I got to the Barclays, they had already left, but I was able to catch them on Fulton Street, and they marched from Fulton Street all the way back to McCarran Park in Williamsburg. So if you know where the Barclays Center is, I walked covering that protest all the way back to McCarran Park. It took me 2 trains to get to Barclays. Wasn't much interaction with the police from the Barclays Center to McCarran Park, and then I hopped back on the G train to come back downtown because I heard there was police activity with this group. Thanks to Twitter and the police scanner accounts, I was able to find this march. So I've been running around the city all day long. So being that I was, if you want to see any of my coverage from earlier today, you can go to Twitter. Follow me on Twitter and you can kind of see how I live tweeted throughout the day. And then I realized, you know what? It's kind of dark, so I'm not going to get much pictures at this point in the night. So I decided to just come live. So I'll let you guys see what's going on. Even into the night, people are still protesting. So all day long. What's going on, everybody? What's going on? If you guys are familiar, I'm horrible at watching the comment section because I'm always scoping when there's so much going on around me. So I'm sorry if I miss your comment because I'm very rarely looking at the comment section. I'm kind of paying attention to what's going on. This is Brooklyn. We're in Brooklyn, New York. This is a peaceful protest. Yes, there's no looting. There's nobody destroying anything. No one knocking over trash cans. No one burning trash cans. As you can see here, you got support for the protesters. They give out water, snacks. At the last protest I was at, if you're following me on Twitter, there was a protester who collapsed during that Barclays Center to McCarran Park march, which is several miles from Barclays Center to McCarran, especially when you're not going in a straight line and you're kind of zigzagging through city streets. It's a long march and you got to take care of yourself. If any of you are watching and you've been out to marches or you plan on going out to a march, make sure you bring water, you bring granola bar or something, some oats or candy bar, something to keep you, your blood sugar can drop really fast out here, especially in the heat. You don't want to pass out or fall out, collapse, hurt yourself while you're marching.
Paparazzi, catch my fire and my cotton fresh. I'm so reckless when I rock my Givenchy dress. I'm so possessive, so I rock his rock necklaces. My jet in Alabama, mama Louisiana. You mix that Negro with that Creole, make a Texas Bama.
I do want you guys to notice there's a lot of propaganda out there by news talking about protests is going to contribute to the virus spiking, but as you can see, most of the people, if not 95% of the people out here are masked up. Again, you've seen they were handing out water. They've been handing out hand sanitizer. So in New York City, the activist movement takes care of their own. They have medics on site, hand sanitizer on site, food. They do a pretty good job of taking care of the protesters out here. It's one of the reasons why I do live stream, to capture the movement in action, live, no edits, so you guys can see it how it happens. You can see for yourself and make your own judgments. I try my best to narrate as I'm out here so I can kind of bring clarity if you can't figure out what's going on. Sometimes context is lost. You are watching through a screen, but here you go. You guys are seeing it for yourself. There's no looting going on. I don't know what day it is. Protests have been going on nonstop for at least, 9-10 days? You got the police all the way in the back trailing the march. Said the DJ lit? Yeah, they got the tunes playing. So we're headed down Eastern Parkway. There may not be a parade this year, so this may be the best thing, next best thing. Protest with tunes playing. So where are you guys watching from? It's not much going on right now. If anything picks up, I'll swing the camera around. But where's everybody watching from? Has anybody been involved in any protests? Miami, Oregon. I know there's been protests in Oregon. There's always protests in Oregon. BX. There's a few demonstrations in the Bronx. UK. Yes, the UK has been very, very active. Maryland, and no, you haven't been to any protests. I know the DMV area has had a lot of action as well, especially DC. DC has been crazy. People being rude to Bree. I don't know if you guys know, but Bree is the first VIP of my scope, so you got to be nice to her. Otherwise, the moderator's going to take you out. Not a good idea. Good idea to say anything to Bree. What's up, Brooklyn man? What's going on, bro? No, Bree, NYC Bree inside the chat right now. Somebody was being a little mouthy, so one of the moderators took care of him. Yeah, it happens. I was gonna see if he was giving too much of a heavy hand. I went to go see what he said, because you know sometimes I'll unmute people, but no, I think he deserved it. But yeah, so we got Maryland, Oregon, BX. Where else is everybody? There's 50 people in here. Where's everybody from? Wow. Did I know 4 people shot in Brooklyn? Yes, I do, because my journalist app is actually requesting footage. So I'm aware of it. While I'm watching you guys, my notifications pop up, so I'm always aware of what's going on in the city. You know, I'm a freelancer, so I have an app where people request footage, and if I decide I want to go, I go. Protests in Miami, yeah. The Miami protests have been a little hostile. Police haven't really been letting people do what they want over there.
We don't get it. What we want?
So let me turn this camera around. We're passing the Brooklyn Museum. Also, I can hear a chopper above my head. So I'm gonna back up a little bit. I don't know if you guys can see it, but yeah, there it goes. There's a helicopter. So there's a helicopter following the march as it heads down. As the march heads down Eastern Parkway. You got people clinking pots in support of the protests. New York City overall has been very, very receptive of the protests. As much as a lot of people in the city. Throughout the country, I think people are realizing that there is a little bit too much trigger-happy culture inside the police of the United States. We've always had the most police shootings, the most police murders in the entire world. And I think people are coming to the realization that some of those shootings, if not most of those shootings, are unnecessary. So you see politicians shifting. We got a little disagreement. People want to. So one thing you'll notice is that the bikers have kind of emulated a tactic that the police use. NYPD has started to use bikers as a first line of defense, and the police, the police have used them as a first line of defense, and now many of the protests have bikers that are the first line of defense. So it's very interesting. The bike culture in New York is very, very strong. As I try to weave through the bikes. Make sure I don't get killed. If I fall, I'm dropping my cell phone and my camera, which costs a lot of money. I don't want to drop that. But as you can see, there's a lot of bikes out here. A lot of bikes. So yeah, the bikes have been a very important part of activism lately, and I'll show you what I mean. Through the street, there is no police ahead of the march. So the bikers are now acting as a first line of defense. They're moving traffic around. They are protecting the march to make sure no one runs into. If anybody were to try to run into the march, they would have to run through the bikers first. So the bikers act as a first line of defense. much like how the NYPD used their bike as a first line of defense. Of course, they're a lot faster. They're agile. They can swing through city streets a lot more efficiently than an SUV or a motorcycle can. What am I fighting? I'm not fighting anything. I'm a journalist. I don't fight. I document. And if you've been living under a rock and haven't came out for the last 3 months, maybe if you've only been paying attention to premium snap girls on Periscope and you haven't been watching the news, there are protests all across the United States for the Minneapolis police murder of George Floyd. If you don't know who George Floyd is, or if you don't recognize the name by now, I suggest you do your Googles and go figure it out, because New York City is protesting for George Floyd, as well as LA and Detroit and Chicago, Texas, Maine, all 50 states, Canada, Mexico, Brazil, France, UK. I can keep going and keep going. Spanning almost every country in Africa, New Zealand, even in Asia, people are protesting for George Floyd because there's been way too many fucking police shootings in the United States. And people have decided that enough is enough. Looks like we got sage burning. Is that sage? It smells like sage. Support from the we got drivers in support, as you can see. This has been going on all for the last 2 weeks. When drivers see a protest, very few are upset. Very few are in opposition of the blockades of the cyclists and the protesters. They are supportive. You got the MTA in support, FDNY. Pretty much the only group in the city who's not really in support of the protests are the NYPD. No curfew. Curfew was lifted yesterday. And we're actually, I don't know what time it is. Let me see, what time is it? I think it is still Monday. Let me check my other phone. Yes, it's still Monday. So tomorrow we actually are entering phase 1 of our reopening, which was announced by Bill de Blasio yesterday. So we will be reopening. And we're coming upon what street is this? Franklin. This is Franklin Ave. So it looks like they decided which direction to go. We're gonna go left. They're trying to figure out where to go.
up on decal between Malcolm X and Broadway. Yeah. Shut down! Shut down! Shut down! Shut it down! Shut it down! Justice! Now! Justice! Now! Justice! Now! Justice! Now! Shut it down! Shut it down! Shut it down!
Oh man, my feet hurt. I don't know how many miles I've walked today, but I'm aching. Plus this big ass back gear on me is weighing me down.
What do we want? What do we want? What do we want?
So honestly, depending on how far they go,
What do we want?
I may just keep going. I live in the direction that we're going. I gotta break off left sooner or later, but we are still headed in the direction of my home, so. You gotta be getting ready for that economic depression that's coming. I could have sworn we were already in a recession, so. 40 million people unemployed, it can't really get much worse than this. Is it a peaceful protest? From what I see, yes. There hasn't been any arrests. I'm pretty sure if there was any kind of violence, NYPD would jump on the chance to make an arrest. So we're gonna make the assumption that it's been overall peaceful. I've only caught up with them maybe 30 minutes ago. I was in another location in McCarran Park, and I left that area to come here. And that march I was with for maybe at least an hour. They marched from Barclays all the way down to McCarran Park. And then I took the train back downtown, and I've been with them for the last maybe 30 minutes. So, in the last 30 minutes has been very peaceful. Well, if it's going to be a decade long, I think they're going to need a new name for it, because it won't be a depression. maybe a slump, or who knows, some kind of new name, something catchy. Because a whole decade of being at the bottom of the barrel needs a new name. Yes, very good exercise. I think I'm in great health. I haven't been sick in 20 years. So marching with about 20, 30 pounds on my back, 30, 40 hours, for about 5 or 6 hours a day. In addition to maybe 5 out of the last 7 days I've been covering protests. So my body is aching, my back is sore, my feet hurt. But it's probably not going to be another time like this. We had a COVID right back to back with nationwide protests, so I'm probably never going to get a chance to cover this much history in my lifetime. This might be the highlight of my life as a photographer. Being able to capture things that can be in yearbooks, things that I can hand down to my kids and tell them stories about what was going on. May never get this chance, so the little bit of discomfort I get right now will be worth it when I can show people all these beautiful pictures. It is history. Which is the only reason why I'm compelled to come out here despite me being fucking tired, extremely tired. All right, it looks like you guys can see he's tired of looking at me in the dark and shit. Still got the police trailing. Lots of police trailing. And the bikers are letting a few cars go before they make the decision which direction to go. Let me clean off this lens. So they're gonna go head north. I kind of look at I always look at Eastern Parkway. Got the sage going. He's gonna have a little bit of trouble burning that out. Yeah, if you're not used to burning sage, you got to be careful. You fuck around and catch on fire playing around with sage, man. So the protest is heading north into Bed-Stuy. Right now I think we're on Nostrand. Yeah, we're on Nostrand right now. So we're gonna head north into Bed-Stuy, maybe Fulton Street. So we are luckily they are heading in the direction of my residence. So it's going to be a nice short trek home. I can actually walk home from this direction. So I'm glad they're heading this way because I've had a really long day. So we are in the hood now. When I first started the live, we were in Park Slope, which is a little bit more affluent. It's kind of a mix, a little bit more diverse. We're in the hood now. We're headed towards Bed-Stuy. So you're gonna see even more support for an anti-police protest. Robert, what's going on, man?
Good, how you doing?
Long time no see.
Yeah, how you been?
Busy.
That's right home. I live right here.
Yeah, I'm hoping they keep going in my direction too. Make it a lot easier. You been covering all week?
Pretty much.
I know you're tired, man. Yes, it is still happening. It's definitely still happening. They're giving out supplies, like I mentioned earlier.
We got water. Anybody need water?
Thank you, sir. Free water. They've been giving out water, snacks, hand sanitizer. So you can never have enough water, so. Trying to figure out which direction to go.
Turn my face up. Hey, me out of that part. Do it. I think we're gonna do it. Still, it's a lot of shit.
Like 5 minutes. Shit, that's
So I'm gonna wrap it up. Gonna wrap up the live stream. Heading to Fulton Street? Yeah, they're heading to Fulton Street. It's interesting because the cops are weaving through the streets. I think maybe because it's a one-way, so the cops are weaving through the side streets. It's live. Be careful. So the cops are weaving through the side streets. So you want to be careful that they don't try to go in. I don't know if they want to try to clamp down and crack down on the live stream. I mean on the protests. But they're not doing anything wrong. There's no violence. They're not looting. They're not destroying anything. They're just weaving through the streets. So who knows? Got some support from sanitation. And again, as I mentioned earlier, the bikers they act as a front line for the protests. Make sure no one tries to run through. You notice there's been quite a few instances where you get motorists trying to run into protesters. So there's really not a chance of that happening with this barrier of bikers. Oh, you're welcome. I figured I'd go live, show what I've been doing all day. I've been covering protests since 1 o'clock. I was in the city. I was early in Manhattan. I was in McCarran Park in Williamsburg. I was downtown Brooklyn. I followed this group here from downtown Brooklyn all the way here. So. I mean, yeah, that is the point of Periscope, right? Let you see things through other people's eyes. So I'm a photojournalist. I've been actually doing this very thing right here for the last, I want to say, no, there's no looting. I see your questions about looting. There's been no looting today. There's been no reports of looting from the NYP today. I'm pretty sure somebody would have requested footage of it if there was looting. And I get a lot of requests throughout the day. But yeah, the whole point of Periscope is to let people see what other people do, you know, kind of get a perspective that outside of your own, and this is kind of my perspective. Since 2014, I've been covering protests, and I've kind of witnessed a whole generation of protesters kind of hand the baton to a new group. So interestingly, at least here in New York City, there's kind of two generations of protesters. You have those who are birthed from Occupy, and those who have watched the last 5 years and have come up of age. And I think that's why the movement has changed so much. You know, the looting. A lot of black communities are like, look, we tried the peaceful BLM marches for the last 6-7 years, and no one listened. And so then you got what happened in Minneapolis. You got a Target burnt down, 2 police stations, several convenience stores. And like Martin said almost 70 years ago, a riot is the language of those unheard. So here we are, first week of June, protests all across the country and across the world in solidarity. Actually, it's not. And we can have a whole discussion about the looting, but I'm going to tell you this. Someone who's covered the protests for the last 5 years, I know what the graffiti said when I went down to Soho. I went to Soho to see the looting, and I watched the graffiti. I saw the graffiti that was there, and those weren't criminals. The graffiti was protest graffiti. I don't know about looting in other cities, but that first night of looting was definitely activists. Now, media is going to spin it how they want to spin it.
Let's go, people.
Now, the 34th Street looting, I think the hood kind of caught on. Once the hood, criminals, they figure out, they're looting in Soho, and they're not stopping anybody. 34th Street got hit, 125th got hit, Fordham and the Bronx got hit. Those weren't activists, but Soho specifically. There may have been criminals in that element, but it was definitely activists who did that. And I have the pictures to prove it. It's one of the beautiful things about being media. Midtown got hit, but Midtown, it might have been, I want to say, if there was activists there for the follow-up looting, it was very few, because it wasn't as organized. See, the thing about looting isn't really organized. Activists organize. What happened was that first night with the looting in Soho, there was Ubers, there was Revels, skateboards, power boards. It was very organized. Extremely organized. People were jumping in Ubers with stuff from high-end stores. Historically, looting doesn't work that way. And then if you look at the looting that was going on 34th Street, and you look at the looting that was going on in LA and all the other cities, it didn't resemble what happened in New York. And that's why I say specifically New York and what happened in Soho that first night of looting, it was most definitely a mix. There were activists present because the graffiti that was left behind was activist graffiti. Quarantine? Well, quarantine is over with. We're officially reopening. So these Revel bikes, the Revel bikes that you see here, these Revel bikes were used during the looting that first night in Soho. These bikes here. So if to touch more on the looting, right? My perception is, one, if it wasn't for the looting in Minneapolis, the devastation that it was caused in Minneapolis, and then the replication of what happened in Minneapolis and other cities. In other cities, they didn't burn anything down. There were very few buildings burned. No one tried to topple a police station. But the looting that happened was replicated in other cities. And the media has tried to spin it as it's criminals. And I believe it's because the elites, the people who have power, who have money invested in all of these things, were scared. Imagine if you connected the looting with the protest. Because it wasn't a protest, it was a riot. Minneapolis was not a protest. Minneapolis was a riot. Everything else was a protest everywhere else. But Minneapolis was a riot. And never in history have you ever tried to see them separate the looting from the rioting. The riots were in protest of what happened, but they tried to separate it and say the looting is people taking advantage of it. Of course people are taking advantage of it. Otherwise you would just destroy the fucking merchandise. You would steal it but you would destroy it on site. You would just go into the business and destroy everything. No one's gonna just destroy anything. They're gonna steal the fucking merchandise. They're gonna go into stores and take shit. When have you ever seen someone just destroy shit just for the sake of destroying it? Not in America. This isn't fucking the Batman movie with Joker and he decides to burn money. No, they're gonna take the shit and find a way to make some money off of it and sell it. We're in a fucking pandemic. People haven't been working for 3 months. And so you expect them to go and loot a store but destroy everything that they looted? It makes no sense, man. So it's interesting to see how media has spinned, politicians have spinned it so that you separate the looting from the protests when they are very much a part of the original protest. New York had no shooting recently. There's no reason for the protest to be here in New York and in LA and Chicago and Florida other than in solidarity with Minneapolis. So how do you separate the looting that's in solidarity with what's going on in Minneapolis? These are all called the George Floyd protests. George Floyd's protest was a riot. The city rioted. So how do you separate the looting that happened in Minneapolis from the looting that happens in here in New York? If it's all in solidarity with that city, it makes no sense. But if you listen to media, they will spin it how they decide to spin it. Because chaos is scary. If everything goes out the window and the cops aren't willing to go and stop thousands of people from stealing, you can't stop thousands of people. You can arrest a few, you might get 100. But if 5,000 get away, that's a lot of merchandise, man. So in a way and pretty much in like a PR, public relations operation, they try to separate it so that people stop. Because if it was established that the form of protest was to go and destroy capitalism, many of these activists are not capitalists. They're socialists, which is why the looting happened. It happened because their perspective is property is being valued over human life. That is why the protest happened. That's what you can see in the graffiti that was left in Soho. Property being valued over human life. And so this is why it's interesting to see media spin it that way. Because if the word spread, if the narrative is this country values property over human life, and this is why black people are continuing to die, because that man died over a $20 bill, it kind of throws everything out the window. The looting might not stop. So I understand it. You're bringing up black on black crime. You don't bring up white on white crime. You don't talk about school shootings, so let's not bring up gang activity. Everybody's not in a gang. Gang shootings are not relevant to everybody's life. There actually are very few gang-involved shootings in comparison to everything else that goes on in the city, just like white on white crime with school shootings are very few and far in between. They happen often, they happen frequent, way too frequently, and they're tragedy. But don't use it as a narrative to kind of combat what's going on. Black on black crime is a fallacy. It's no different than school shootings. Guess what? There's never been a school shooting in a black neighborhood, ever. All the guns that are in black neighborhoods, why are there no school shootings? Think about that. Not one school shooting in a black neighborhood. All the guns that are in New York City, why aren't there school shootings in New York City? Gangs have been here forever. All crime is real. No one said crime isn't real. And honestly, in my personal opinion, black on black crime is not something that we need to discuss with white people or anybody outside of our community, especially since you don't value us anyway. if you justify police shooting black people, then there's no need for us to even discuss black on black crime with you. But you guys, anybody who uses that as an argument doesn't have much of a brain anyway. They just like to be contrarians, like to have something to say, like to have an opinion. But if you go into their own personal lives, most of the time their shit isn't right either. But it is what it is. This is America. We have all types of issues. If you got money, your family's fucked up. Your family is great, but you might be broke. You don't have much. It's called life. There's no such thing as white on white crime or black on black crime. It's all crime. There's white collar crimes, quote unquote white collar crimes. You know, there's crimes of poverty, crimes of passion. Those are all things that are left. You need to leave those to legal definitions. Taking things outside of their context and using them in social settings is just for argument's sake.
No justice! No justice, no peace! No justice, no peace!
Yeah, bring that energy.
It's definitely a privilege in the United States to be able to protest and not have the military come and crack down and shoot at you. But it's in our Constitution, right? But if you go to my last stream, if you go and scroll down, take time to look at it, the NYPD actually cracked down on a protest. They kind of beat a lot of people. So there was some suppression of the marches here in New York City. If you follow Twitter, you'll see a lot of instances where young ladies were pushed for no reason, even to the point where the governor and the district attorney have planned to file charges against officers. A few officers have quit. There's been a lot of light shed on the practices of NYPD. And it's only because of the recent events that people are willing to say, you know what, enough is enough. So it may not be a military pulling out M16s on whole crowds, but then NYPD specifically is very, very used to hitting people over the head with batons. So it is what it is. I mean, everybody has their perspective, they have their opinion. Honestly, how I look at it, specifically with the looting, people who felt safe before, who looked at the police as a safety net to prevent their nice utopia here in America, they don't feel safe. The looting made a lot of people not feel safe. And when people don't feel safe, things happen. The looting made the neighborhood of Soho very unsafe. The people who spend tens of thousands of dollars on those apartments in Soho did not feel safe. And the very next thing that happened was a curfew. Be careful. Well, if we talk about, someone mentioned black on black crime earlier, right? And again, crime is always going to be there in places where there's very little opportunity. So if you divest, and if you don't know what divest is, you take some of the funds from one place and you allocate them in another location. So let's, for example here, argument's sake, let's say we take a significant amount of money from the NYPD. Let's say we take $1 billion, just $1 billion. They have $6 billion, right? $6 billion, and they couldn't stop looting. They allowed looters to loot for hours, right? But they have a $6 billion budget. So let's say we take $1 billion of those $6 billion, and we allocate it towards the neighborhoods that are impoverished. Programs, jobs, facilities that will allow for more opportunities. Chances are you're going to have more opportunities and people won't take the risk of going to jail because it doesn't make logical sense. So the school to prison pipeline that's created, you can take $1 billion You can put it into mental health facilities. You can put it into drug programs. You can put it into homeless housing, shelter. There's a lot of things you can do to prevent people from committing crime, so that they're not feeling like out of desperation their only option is to commit crime. And that actually makes it easier on the NYPD, because with less criminals, they don't need more funding. They don't need more overtime. They don't need to allocate more of their resources towards petty crimes if the petty crimes are less likely to happen, much like how you see in affluent neighborhoods. So, divesting in the NYPD is not necessarily a bad idea. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to be effective immediately. But 5 years down the line, if you take some of that money and you continue to invest it into small businesses in all these neighborhoods, you will see more opportunity. You'll give these kids more opportunity so that they don't feel like they need to go into the streets and do things that their brothers and their uncles and their fathers needed to do to survive. If anything's taught you about the American economy, this pandemic should have, that it's very fragile. Opportunities aren't everywhere, and it's going to be fucked up for a long time. So if people don't feel like there's a way, they're gonna resort to crime. So maybe divesting in the NYPD, not taking all of the money away, but a small fraction of it. $6 billion. If $6 billion couldn't help them stop looters, they're not going to miss that $1 billion. Trust me. We're not saying divest in Homeland Security. If you're worried about terrorism, there's a department that handles that. It's called Homeland Security. So that's just my little rant right there about defunding NYPD, since people are not really educated about how economics works. The cops are in the back. Well, the cops were in the back. Actually, let me go turn it around. I can't see the cops. So I don't think the cops are following anymore. Cops are near, but I don't know where they are exactly. They're probably on the adjacent streets, because the protest is going down one-way blocks, so it's really hard to try to box in the protest when you're going through one-ways. So usually what the police do is they'll follow from the adjacent block. So they may ride down that block or the block on the other side to keep an eye on the protest. So there's a BLM banner hanging from the ceiling here. Somebody asked where the cops were. Yeah, you know how it is. It's Periscope. Periscope is always full of the trolls. My back is killing me though. So here we are back on Eastern Parkway.
said the beat just done. When these getting weak, oh my God, my God, but we gon' be
alright. We gon' be alright.
Now that's why I rock for the shoes. Hot boy, you ain't in the field, you a top boy. We gon' turn that boy up like a cowboy. I'm the one that they envy like cowboy. She wanna fuck with real, that's the style. Ain't no window shopping. You man, I do window shopping. I be in all the stores, and no we ain't window shopping. She go back to the car. I make it quick for her. We run it back like an option. You see me outside. You see me outside. Here we gon' slide. They ready when we arrive. Poppin' that up, but they don't want to smoke. You see me outside. Sing that Aggie, we gon' slide.
Excuse me.
Just cause I dance, don't think I'm the way you pull up the stage. To make you defend. VVS goes with our wrist. All this water that you guys are putting on me out. They told me the price I said. I still ain't over no budget. Fit in the line with these budgets. I made like 200 in London. You out here guessing this bitch, you rubber stuff like you butter. If I see an album, would throw up the car. I'm at the concert. She came with a trash, she knocked me down. She made a copy of us, I want to get in York. You say they outside. shit ain't never been.
Oh my God, my shoulders are killing me. I think I should have got off on the Bed-Stuy side because it's going to be a long walk back now. Let's see what time it is. The trains will cut off at 1 o'clock, so I got an hour to get back to the other side of Brooklyn. So we'll see how this goes. Oh, thank you. Curfew is over in New York City, but we still have the overnight cleaning. So during the overnight cleaning, trains stop running from 1 to 5. I don't have work in the morning. I do have an interview, so I do need some rest. I got to get some rest because I have an interview in the afternoon. But I do want to try to get back to the other side. Thank you for the super hard. Appreciate it. Appreciate it much. So what I'm going to do is, my first chance I get, I'm going to go head back up because we're in Crown Heights now, and I need to get back into the sty so I can get to Bushwick, which is a significant ways away right now. But I do appreciate everybody for checking out the stream. Figured out, I just let you guys see what's going on in New York City. Especially late at night after it gets dark, it gets interesting. So yeah, so it's an interview with a mainstream news platform. So hopefully it goes good and I'll be on TV. But it's I believe it's just as a black photographer and my perspective of what's going on in the city, especially someone who's been covering it for about 5 years. A lot of people have just got involved with everything that's going on, and maybe it's their first time being involved with protests, but I've been involved since 2014 on the streets covering the movement. So I see a lot of different significant changes, and it's interesting. It's history. So it's kind of good to be recognized for my work and getting some mainstream media attention. Thank you, Nikki. Appreciate it. Thank you. And I hope everybody's staying safe. Everybody's continuing to quarantine. If you're in an area that is still not meeting the requirements for reopening, I hope you guys are. If there's looting and violence in your area due to the protests, people are being angry about what's going on, I hope you're staying safe. Hopefully justice is served. Hopefully this changes America for the better. Hopefully we can stop taking the streets and saying people's name because they were shot unarmed by a police officer. Hopefully this is a thing of the past. And everybody taking the streets for weeks It's almost 2 weeks that people have been taking the streets all across the country. Hopefully it does change the world for the better. Create the equality that everybody deserves. And, the next generation gets to reap the benefits, because it's not about us. We've already seen all this bullshit go on, but it's about the next generation. So hopefully this changes for the next generation, so the kids don't have to go through this. Kids don't have to see this kind of bullshit, I've been to way too many protests, probably more than 200 in the last 5 years. I've been more than 200 protests easily. I've seen a lot of names. I've heard a lot of stories about people, and I'm kind of desensitized. But for a lot of people, seeing that video, it shook them up, and it compelled people to change the world. So rest in peace, George Floyd. And I want to say thank you to you all. I try to do my best to give you the news, raw news, uncut, unedited, from the streets, so that you guys can make your own decisions, make your own judgments. I'm tired as hell. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to figure out how to navigate my ass home. But I thank you all again and again. I can't repay you guys for all the support that you've given me over the years. Some of you have been with me since my beginning of Periscope live streaming. Also, shout out to everybody who's watching me on Twitter. I know I have a growing Twitter following because of the recent protests. So shout out to everybody who's following on Twitter. Everybody's watching on Periscope. If I head out tomorrow, which is likely, I may head out tomorrow. If I'm not too tired, not too beat up from walking around all day today, I may cover some protests. If you want to know what's going on in New York, if you're in the New York area and you want to get into the streets, you want to know where protests are, on Instagram, there is an account called Justice for George Floyd NYC. I think that's the believe they count it. Justice for George Floyd NYC is an Instagram account that has been posting all of the various demonstrations throughout the city. And on Twitter, if you're following on Twitter, I believe there's protest 2020, something like that. If you're on Twitter, hit me with a tweet or a DM, and I'll share the account that I've been getting all my updates from. Again, and you can hit me on IG as well. Shoot me a DM on IG if you want to use IG, and I'll share the account with you that has been giving me all the updates. So I think that's about it. Peace and love, and I'll holla at y'all.